Your relationship is dying and you don't even know it. Every argument, every disagreement, every moment you choose silence over speaking up. You think you're managing conflict, but what you're really doing is writing the obituary for your connection. The way you handle disagreements isn't just about winning or losing, it's a direct window into the health of your relationship. And most people are looking through cracked glass.
Think about your last fight. Did you attack? Did you withdraw? Did you accommodate until you felt invisible? Did you compete like your life depended on it? Did you actually try to collaborate?
These aren't just personality quirks, these are relationship diagnostics, and the results might shock you. But here's the plot twist: nobody tells you. The conflict resolution style you think makes you the good person in the relationship might actually be the one slowly poisoning it. And the style you've been taught to avoid, it might be exactly what your relationship needs to survive. Your brain doesn't distinguish between physical and emotional threats. When conflict arises, your amygdala fires up like you're facing a saber-toothed tiger: fight, flight, or freeze. These ancient survival mechanisms become your relationship playbook, but unlike our ancestors who faced actual predators, you're stuck in a living room with someone you're supposed to love, and that changes everything. Researchers have identified 5 primary conflict resolution styles, each one a different strategy your nervous system deploys when it perceives relational danger: competing, the warrior's approach; accommodating, the people-pleaser's default; avoiding, the escape artist's specialty; compromising, the diplomat's tool; and collaborating, the rarest and most demanding style of all. Each one tells a story about how safe you feel in your own relationship. The competing style turns your living room into a battlefield. You see conflict as a zero-sum game where someone has to lose for you to win. Your heart rate spikes, your voice gets louder, and your goal becomes domination, not resolution. Studies suggest this style often correlates with higher levels of cortisol during disagreements. You're literally bathing your relationship in stress hormones. Your partner becomes the enemy, not the teammate. And while you might win the argument, you're losing the war for intimacy. But here's where it gets interesting. Competing isn't always toxic. When used sparingly and strategically, it can actually signal to your partner that something matters deeply to you. The problem isn't the occasional competitive moment, it's when competition becomes your default setting. When every disagreement turns into a courtroom where you're both the prosecutor and the judge, your relationship becomes a scoreboard instead of a sanctuary. Like this content, hit that like button because we're about to dive into the style that might be secretly destroying your connection. The accommodating style seems noble on the surface. You're the peacekeeper, the one who always gives in for the sake of harmony. You think you're being loving, but your nervous system is actually in a state of learned helplessness. Every time you accommodate against your true feelings, you're teaching your brain that your needs don't matter. Researchers call this self-silencing, and it's more dangerous than most people realize. When you constantly accommodate, you're not avoiding conflict, you're just postponing it. Think of it like a pressure cooker with no release valve. The steam builds and builds until something explodes. And when it does, it's usually catastrophic. Studies show that people who over-accommodate often experience higher rates of depression and anxiety. You're not just giving up arguments. You're giving up pieces of yourself. Your partner might love how easygoing you are, but they're also slowly losing respect for you. Not because they're cruel, but because humans are wired to value what has substance and pushes back. When you have no boundaries, you become invisible. And it's hard to love someone you can't see. The accommodation style often creates relationships that look peaceful but feel empty. The avoiding style is conflict resolution's disappearing act. You see disagreement coming and you vanish. Physically, emotionally, mentally, you change the subject, leave the room, or simply shut down. Your nervous system chooses flight, and your relationship becomes a game of emotional hide and seek. But here's the brutal truth about avoidance. Problems don't disappear just because you stop looking at them. When you avoid conflict, you're essentially telling your relationship that it's not worth the discomfort of working through problems. You'd rather preserve your temporary comfort than fight for long-term connection. Research indicates that avoidant partners often show increased activation in brain regions associated with emotional suppression. You're literally training your brain to disconnect from your own feelings and your partner's needs. The avoiding style creates relationships that exist in a perpetual state of surface-level pleasantness. You never fight, but you also never truly connect. Issues accumulate like dust in corners you refuse to clean. And eventually, the accumulated neglect becomes suffocating. Your partner starts to feel like they're in a relationship with a ghost. Present but not really there. But avoidance can serve a purpose. Sometimes you need space to process before you can engage productively. The key is intentional avoidance versus reflexive running away. Saying "I need some time to think about this, can we talk tonight?" is different from disappearing every time things get uncomfortable. The compromising style sounds like the golden middle path. You each give up something to find a solution that works for both. It seems fair, balanced, reasonable. But compromise has a dark side that most relationship advice ignores. When you constantly split the difference, nobody ever gets what they actually need. You're both walking away partially satisfied and partially resentful. Think of compromise as relationship math. You want 10, they want 0, so you settle for 5. But what if the real issue isn't about numbers? What if it's about understanding why you want 10 and why they want 0? Compromise often shortcuts the deeper conversation that could lead to a solution where both people feel truly heard and valued. It's efficient but not always effective. Studies suggest that couples who rely heavily on compromise often report feeling like roommates rather than romantic partners. You're managing your relationship like a business transaction, instead of nurturing it like a living thing that needs authentic connection to thrive. Every compromise becomes a small sacrifice on the altar of keeping the peace. However, compromise becomes powerful when it emerges from understanding rather than from the need to just get along. When you truly comprehend your partner's perspective and they understand yours, compromise feels like teamwork instead of surrender. Ready for the style that could revolutionize your relationship? Make sure you're subscribed because this next part changes everything. The collaborating style is conflict resolution's holy grail, but it's also the most demanding. You approach disagreements like puzzle-solving partners rather than opponents. Your goal isn't to win or to keep the peace. It's to find a solution that honors both people's needs and strengthens the relationship. But collaboration requires something most people aren't willing to give: complete emotional vulnerability. When you collaborate, you have to be willing to be wrong. You have to be curious about your partner's experience even when it challenges your own. You have to stay regulated when every instinct tells you to defend or attack. Research shows that couples who master collaboration have lower divorce rates and higher relationship satisfaction scores. But here's the catch: collaboration can't be forced or faked. True collaboration happens when both people feel safe enough to be completely honest. It requires what researchers call emotional co-regulation. Your nervous systems actually sync up, allowing you to think clearly even in the middle of disagreement. You become teammates facing the problem together instead of opponents facing each other. The conflict becomes something you work through, not something that works through you. But collaboration isn't always appropriate. Sometimes you need quick decisions. Sometimes one person genuinely knows better. Sometimes you're too activated to think clearly. The magic isn't in collaborating all the time. It's in knowing when collaboration serves your relationship and when other styles might be more effective. Here's what most people miss about conflict resolution styles: they're not fixed personality traits. They're learned responses that can change. You're not doomed to repeat the patterns you learned in your family of origin. Your brain is plastic, your nervous system is trainable, and your relationships can evolve. But change requires awareness, and awareness requires honesty about patterns you might prefer to ignore. The healthiest couples aren't the ones who never fight. They're the ones who fight well. They understand that conflict is information, not warfare. They see disagreements as opportunities to know each other more deeply, not threats to their connection. They've learned to regulate their own emotional state while staying curious about their partner's experience. Your conflict resolution style reveals how safe you feel in your relationship. When you feel truly secure, you can collaborate. When you feel threatened, you default to survival mode. The goal isn't to never feel threatened. It's to create enough safety that threat becomes the exception rather than the rule. And that requires both people to commit to growing their emotional capacity. Think about the relationships in your life that feel most nourishing. Chances are they're with people who can disagree with you without making you feel unsafe. They can express their needs without attacking yours. They can be curious about your perspective even when it differs from theirs. These aren't superhuman abilities. They're learnable skills that transform relationships from battlegrounds into sanctuaries. So what does your conflict resolution style say about your relationship health? If you're constantly competing, you might be prioritizing being right over being connected. If you're always accommodating, you might be so afraid of conflict that you're avoiding intimacy. If you're perpetually avoiding, you might be protecting yourself at the expense of your relationship's growth. If you're defaulting to compromise, you might be managing your relationship instead of nurturing it. But here's the empowering truth. Awareness is the first step toward change. Simply knowing your patterns gives you the power to choose differently. You can learn to notice when your nervous system goes into threat mode. You can develop the skills to stay curious instead of defensive. You can practice expressing your needs without attacking your partner's character. Your relationship deserves more than survival mode. It deserves the kind of conflict that brings you closer together instead of driving you apart. It deserves disagreements that end with deeper understanding instead of resentment. It deserves the safety that comes when both people know they can be completely honest without fear of abandonment or attack. The way you handle conflict isn't just about solving immediate problems. It's about creating the emotional climate where love can flourish, or where it slowly suffocates. Every disagreement is a choice point. Will you choose connection or protection? Will you choose curiosity or defensiveness? Will you choose growth or safety? Remember, this is educational content and shouldn't replace professional relationship counseling when serious issues arise. But for most of us, small shifts in how we approach conflict can create massive changes in relationship satisfaction. The question isn't whether you'll have conflict, the question is whether that conflict will make your relationship stronger or weaker. So here's your challenge. Pay attention to your next disagreement. Notice what happens in your body. Notice your first impulse. Notice whether you're trying to win, to escape, to please, or to understand. Notice whether you're treating your partner like an enemy or an ally. And then, if you feel brave enough, try responding differently than you normally would. Your conflict resolution style is a window into your relationship's future. What story is yours telling? Is it a story of two people growing together through challenges? Or is it a story of two people slowly drifting apart because they never learned to fight well? The choice is yours. But the consequences belong to your relationship. What's your go-to conflict style and how do you think it's impacting your relationships? Drop a comment below and let's start a conversation about fighting better. If this video opened your eyes to patterns you didn't realize you had, smash that like button and subscribe for more content that challenges how you think about love, connection, and what it really takes to build relationships that last. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, because the way we handle conflict might just be the most underrated relationship skill of all.